The Epistle to the Hebrews of the Christian Bible is one of the New Testament books whose canonicity was disputed. Traditionally, Paul the Apostle was thought to be the author. However, since the 3rd century this has been questioned, and the consensus among most modern scholars is that the author is unknown. Modern views. In general, the evidence against Pauline authorship is considered too solid for scholarly dispute. Donald Guthrie, in his New Testament introduction, commented that most modern writers find more difficulty in imagining how this epistle was ever attributed to Paul, disposing of the theory. Harold Attridge tells us that it is certainly not a work of the apostle. Daniel Wallace, who holds to the traditional authorship of the other epistles, states that the arguments against Pauline authorship, however, are conclusive. As a result, although a few people today believe Paul wrote Hebrews, such as theologian R.C. Sproul, contemporary scholars generally reject Pauline authorship. As Richard Hurd notes in his introduction to the New Testament, modern critics have confirmed that the epistle cannot be attributed to Paul and have for the most part agreed with Origen's judgment. But as to who wrote the epistle, only God knows the truth. Attridge argues that similarities with Paul's work are simply a product of a shared usage of traditional concepts and language. Others, however, have suggested that they are not accidental, and that the work is a deliberate forgery attempting to pass itself off as a work of Paul. Internal evidence. Internal anonymity. The text as it has been passed down to the present time is internally anonymous, though some older title headings attribute it to the Apostle Paul. Stylistic differences from Paul. The style is notably different from the rest of Paul's epistles, a characteristic noted by Clement of Alexandria, who argued, according to Eusebius, that the original letter had a Jewish audience and was written in Hebrew and later translated into Greek. Some say the evangelist Luke, others, Clement. The second suggestion is more convincing, in view of the similarity of phraseology shown throughout by the Epistle of Clement and the Epistle to the Hebrews, and in absence of any great difference between the two works in the underlying thought. Quote, he concluded that, as a result of this translation, the same complexion of style is found in this epistle and in the Acts, but that the Paul and Apostle were naturally not prefixed. For, he says, in writing to Hebrews who had conceived a prejudice against him and were suspicious of him, he very wisely did not repel them at the beginning by putting his name. This stylistic difference have led Martin Luther and Lutheran churches to refer to Hebrews as one of the Antilegomena, one of the books whose authenticity and usefulness was questioned. As a result, it is placed with James, Jude, and Revelation at the end of Luther's canon. Stylistic similarities to Paul. Some theologians and groups, such as Jehovah's Witnesses, who continue to maintain Pauline authorship, repeat the opinion of Eusebius that Paul omitted his name because he, the apostle to the Gentiles, was writing to the Jews. They conjecture that Jews would have likely dismissed the letter if they had known Paul to be the source. They theorize that the stylistic differences from Paul's other letters are attributed to his writing in Hebrew to the Hebrews, and that the letter was translated into Greek by Luke. The epistle contains Paul's classic closing greeting, "Grace be with you." Is he stated explicitly in 2 Thessalonians chapter 3 verses 17 to 18 and as implied in 1 Corinthians chapter 16 verses 21 to 24 and Colossians chapter 4 verse 18. This closing greeting is included at the end of each of Paul's letters. In the 13th chapter of Hebrews, Timothy is referred to as a companion. Timothy was Paul's missionary companion in the same way Jesus sent disciples out in pairs. Also, the writer states that he wrote the letter from Italy, which also at the time fits Paul. The difference in style is explained as simply an adjustment to a more specific audience, to the Jewish Christians who were being persecuted and pressured to go back to Old Judaism. Although the writing style varies from Paul in a number of ways, some similarities in wordings to some of the Pauline epistles have been noted. In antiquity, some began to ascribe it to Paul in an attempt to provide the anonymous work an explicit apostolic pedigree. Other possible authors. Priscilla. In more recent times, some scholars have advanced a case for Priscilla having been the author of the Epistle to the Hebrews. This suggestion came from Adolf von Harnack in 1900. Harnack claimed that the epistle was written to Rome, not to the Church, but to the inner circle, that the earliest tradition blotted out the name of the author, that we must look for a person who was intimately associated with Paul and Timothy as the author, and that Priscilla matched this description. Ruth Hoppen provides considerable support for her conviction that Priscilla had written the epistle to the Hebrews. She maintains that Priscilla meets every qualification, matches every clue, and looms ubiquitous in every line of investigation. She suggests that the masculine participle may have been altered by a scribe, or that the author was deliberately using a neutral participle as a kind of abstraction. Hebrews chapter 11 verse 32 employs the masculine personal pronoun to refer to its author in the interrogative, "What more shall I say?" While some take this as implying that Priscilla could not have been the author, others suggest that Priscilla as author used the generic masculine pronoun, an age-old practice that some feminine writers follow improperly even today. Another theory is that Priscilla masqueraded as a male in order to gain credibility. Barnabas Tertullian suggested Barnabas as the author, for there is extant withal an epistle to the Hebrews under the name of Barnabas, a man sufficiently accredited by God, as being one whom Paul has stationed next to himself. Internal considerations suggest the author was male, was an acquaintance of Timothy, and was located in Italy. Barnabas, to whom some non-canonical works have been attributed, was close to Paul in his ministry. Luke, Clement, Apollos. Other possible authors were suggested as early as the 3rd century CE. Origen of Alexandria suggested either Luke the Evangelist or Clement of Rome. Martin Luther proposed Apollos, described as an Alexandrian and learned man, popular in Corinth, and adept at using the scriptures and arguing for Christianity while refuting the Jews.